I never imagined I'd be sitting alone in a house that suddenly felt too vast, too empty, and somehow no longer mine. The grandfather clock in the hallway, the one Maxwell had insisted on restoring, despite having no knowledge of antiques, ticked steadily, each sound a reminder that time marched on, even when my world felt frozen. 3 weeks had passed since I buried my husband, yet the pain still felt as raw as the roses I laid on his grave every Sunday. What I didn't expect, however, was that my grief would soon be eclipsed by a battle I never saw coming. Before we dive back in, let us know where you're tuning in from. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow, I've got something even more special lined up just for you. My name is Elelena Whitcraftoft, though everyone has called me Ellie since before I can remember. At 58, I never imagined I'd be starting over. Maxwell and I had 23 beautiful years together. We met later in life, both of us carrying baggage from previous relationships. Mine was emotional scars from a divorce. His was 3 nearly grown children who never quite warmed to the idea of their father finding happiness again. Our wedding at Azure Bay was intimate, with the sunset painting the sky in hues of gold and purple. Maxwell's children, Piers, Bianca, and Xavier, stood stiffly in expensive attire, offering mechanical congratulations while their eyes remained cold. I tried for years to bridge the gap, hosting holiday dinners, remembering birthdays, attending their graduations and weddings. Nothing seemed to thaw the ice. Eventually, Maxwell and I created our own bubble of happiness, focusing on each other and the life we built together at Hyan Estate. Maxwell's death was unexpected. A heart attack while working late at Whitcraftoft Industries headquarters. One moment, he was finalizing acquisition paperwork. The next, he was gone. I wasn't even granted the chance to say goodbye. The funeral was a blur of black clothing and whispered condolences. I remember standing beside the casket, my hand resting on the polished wood, while Piers organized the proceedings with clinical efficiency. Bianca handled the reception with the same precision she applied to her luxury real estate showings. Xavier stood in the corner, nursing a drink, his eyes darting occasionally to the family portrait where his father's hand rested on my shoulder. It was exactly 1 week after the funeral when they descended upon Hyan Estate, all 3 of them arriving within minutes of each other, as if coordinated. "Ellie," Piers began, not bothering to remove his designer sunglasses as he strode into the living room. At 36, he had his father's height but none of his warmth. "We need to discuss the estate." Bianca settled herself on the antique fainting couch, crossing her legs elegantly. "We've been patient, giving you time to grieve, but certain matters can't wait." Xavier, the youngest at 30, wandered around the room, picking up and examining objects as if calculating their value. "Dad would want everything sorted quickly. He always hated loose ends." I invited them to sit, offering tea that none of them accepted. Josephine, our housekeeper of 15 years, quietly brought in a tray anyway, her eyes meeting mine with silent support. "What matters need discussing?" I asked, wrapping my fingers around a warm teacup. Piers cleared his throat. "Father's will, of course. The reading is scheduled for tomorrow at Blackstone Law Offices. We wanted to speak with you beforehand to ensure a smooth transition." Transition. The word felt wrong in my mouth. "Father built this company from nothing," Bianca interjected. "Whitcraftoft Industries is our legacy, our birthright. We've all worked there since university." This wasn't entirely true. Piers had indeed followed his father into business, holding an executive position. Bianca occasionally consulted on property acquisitions. Xavier had been given various roles over the years, none of which he maintained for more than a few months. Maxwell never discussed the specifics of his will with me. I said truthfully, "Maxwell always said everything was taken care of," I replied. Josephine re-entered the room with a fresh pot of tea, and the conversation continued. The pressure from them felt suffocating, but I remained composed. Maxwell had always said there were no loose ends, but now, as his family pushed for control, I wondered what had been hidden, and how much I truly knew about the man I'd shared my life with. The following morning, I dressed with careful precision, the tailored navy suit Maxwell had always admired, pearls he'd gifted me for our 20th anniversary, and his mother's diamond brooch, the first gift he'd ever given me. If I was walking into battle, I would do so with armor. Josephine insisted on driving me to Blackstone law offices. You shouldn't be alone today, she said simply. The building was imposing, a Victorian structure of dark stone and gleaming brass fixtures. Inside, the atmosphere was hushed and reverent, smelling of leather-bound books and polished furniture. Dr. Theodore Blackwood's assistant led us to a conference room where Maxwell's children were already waiting, along with a woman I recognized as Margot Chen, Maxwell's business partner of 30 years. Ellie, my dear, how are you holding up? Margot asked, immediately rising to embrace me. Before I could respond, Dr. Blackwood entered, tall, silver-haired, with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He was Maxwell's lawyer, confidant, and friend for decades. Thank you all for coming, he began, setting his briefcase on the table. Before we proceed with the reading of Maxwell Whitcraft's last will and testament, I have a rather unusual request from Maxwell himself. He removed an envelope from his briefcase. He asked that I read this letter privately to Eleanor first. Piers immediately objected. That's highly irregular. The will should be read in its entirety to all beneficiaries simultaneously. Dr. Blackwood regarded him calmly. Your father's instructions were explicit. Mrs. Whitcraft is to hear this message alone before we continue. You're welcome to wait, or we can reschedule. This raised a few eyebrows, but Piers, Bianca, and Xavier agreed reluctantly. The moment I was alone with Dr. Blackwood, he opened the letter. My dearest Ellie, it began, Maxwell's familiar handwriting filling the page. If you're hearing this, I've left you too soon, and for that, I am truly sorry. 23 years wasn't nearly enough time together, but I treasure every moment we shared. You're about to face a storm. My children have never appreciated your worth, never understood that you were the best part of me. They see Whitcraft Industries as their inheritance, House Iron as their birthright, and you as an obstacle. I felt a tremor in my hands as I continued reading. Maxwell had known his children better than anyone. The letter continued, explaining the legacy I had unknowingly helped save. 15 years ago, Maxwell's company had nearly collapsed, and I had been the one to save it with my analysis and restructuring plans. Maxwell had never told his children that, because he feared they'd resent me even more if they knew. The company they believe is their inheritance exists today because of you, the letter concluded. The will you are about to hear is not my final word. It is a test, a last chance for them to show decency and character. Watch them carefully, my love. Their reactions will tell you everything. Always remember that you are the heart of Hyan, the soul of everything I've built. Maxwell's words hit me like a wave, and I understood the weight of what he had entrusted me to do. It wasn't just about business or wealth. It was about preserving the integrity of everything he had worked for. Dr. Blackwood looked at me with quiet understanding. Maxwell knew his children would behave this way, he said softly. The second will is activated under specific conditions. I swallowed hard. What are those conditions? The first condition is if any of the children attempt to claim ownership of Hyan or its contents before the 90-day period is up, he explained. The second is if evidence of criminal activity surfaces. The third is if harm comes to you. I felt the gravity of his words settle in the room like a storm cloud. Maxwell had been preparing for this moment for a long time. He had seen what his children were capable of and wanted to ensure that, even in his absence, I would be protected. Dr. Blackwood handed me the sealed envelope containing the second will. Are you ready to proceed? I nodded, a sense of quiet determination filling me. The second will would determine the future of everything Maxwell had built. But it was not just a matter of inheritance, it was a test of character, and I wasn't about to let his legacy be tarnished by greed and betrayal. The reading of the will at Blackstone law offices was like a legal battlefield, and I could feel the tension in the air as Dr. Blackwood began outlining Maxwell's wishes. His calm voice contrasted sharply with the storm brewing inside me. The first will, which had promised control of Whitcraft Industries and House Ion Estate to his children, was officially invalidated. The second will, however, had already taken effect, placing everything in my hands. Eleanor shall have residence at Ion Estate for a period of 90 days following the reading of this will to properly organize her affairs and remove her personal belongings, Dr. Blackwood read aloud, as Piers, Bianca, and Xavier exchanged quick, bitter glances. During this time, the property and all its contents remain in trust. A sudden sense of power washed over me, and I straightened, staring down at the documents in my hands. My heart was heavy, but the reality of Maxwell's plan started to sink in. This wasn't just about controlling a business, it was about protecting the people Maxwell had worked to protect, employees, shareholders, and even the employees whose jobs had been saved when I had turned the company around years ago. Xavier, predictably, groaned. 3 more months of waiting. A reasonable courtesy, Dr. Blackwood, he muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I kept my composure. I'm sure you'll be quite comfortable in the time you have left, Xavier, I said coolly, not missing the way his eyes flashed in response. I was done with their condescension. Dr. Blackwood glanced at me with quiet approval. There are, of course, standard clauses regarding the contestation of the will. Should any beneficiary contest these terms, their inheritance would be forfeit and redistributed among the remaining beneficiaries. I felt a chill as I looked at the 3 of them. Their eyes glinted with something sharp, but I could also see the disquiet in their faces. Maxwell's second will was not something they could easily fight. I left Blackstone law offices with a knot in my stomach. Everything I'd been through with Maxwell, all of his secrets and plans, had led to this moment. But it wasn't over yet. The children of Whitcraft were not going to let it go easily. The moment we left the law office, I received a text from Josephine. Boxes have arrived. Ready when you are. I nodded in reply, but a gnawing unease lingered. Everything I'd learned, everything Maxwell had tried to shield me from, was crashing down on me, but I couldn't afford to hesitate now. I had a home to protect, a legacy to safeguard, and a truth to uphold. Maxwell trusted me to see this through, and that's exactly what I was going to do. When I returned to Ion Estate, everything felt different. The house, once so familiar, now felt like a battleground. It was quieter, emptier. The stepchildren had left for the night after their visit to Blackstone, and I was left alone to face the reality of Maxwell's plans, and their consequences. Later that night, I wandered through the halls of Ion Estate. I wasn't ready to face the rooms where Maxwell and I had shared so many memories. Our bedroom, the study, the library, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. Every inch of this house reminded me of him. His absence felt so final, and yet, in a strange way, I felt closer to him than ever before. This house, this life we'd built, was mine now. I would protect it with everything I had. The next morning, as I sat in the study, trying to collect my thoughts, the doorbell rang. I was expecting Josephine, but instead, there was an unfamiliar car parked in the driveway. A police cruiser. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know who this person was, but I didn't have the luxury of ignoring anything now. I opened the door to find a man in plain clothes standing on the porch. He introduced himself as Detective Vincent Caldwell from the Ravensdale Police Department. Mrs. Whitcraft, he said, his voice calm but firm. I apologize for the intrusion, but I need to speak with you regarding your husband's company. I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. What about it? I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the sudden rush of anxiety. There are some financial irregularities we're investigating, he continued. Nothing concerning you directly, he added quickly, but we believe your husband may have uncovered something significant before his death. The pieces began shifting in my mind. Maxwell had been working late the night of his heart attack. The hidden safe in the bedroom closet. The cryptic letter he had written to me. This wasn't just about money. It was about something much bigger. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. After letting Detective Caldwell into the study, I tried to keep calm as he asked about Maxwell's role in the company and whether I had any knowledge of financial dealings that might have been troubling. He seemed sincere, but there was a sharp edge to his questions, as if he was looking for something that might explain Maxwell's sudden death. The conversation turned to the company's restructuring 15 years ago, a time when Maxwell had been under considerable pressure. I recalled how he had worked tirelessly, staying up late and sometimes bringing his work home. He never shared the details with me, but he always said everything had been handled. I had no idea at the time how critical that restructuring was to the survival of Whitcraft Industries, nor did I realize the role I had played in saving the company from financial ruin. The detective, however, was connecting dots I hadn't even considered. "There's a pattern of behavior here," Caldwell said slowly, "and it's all pointing to something deliberate. Someone was weakening the company from within, and they were doing it for profit." The idea hit me like a ton of bricks. Corporate sabotage. Maxwell had suspected that someone was trying to take the company down from the inside, but he had never let on. He had always shielded me from the ugly truths. Now I realized, he was trying to protect me from more than just the children's resentment. There were people within the company who were actively working against him, and that realization sent a shiver down my spine. That night, as I continued to digest the day's revelations, I found myself standing in the quiet of Maxwell's study, alone with the man who had been my partner for so many years. His absence was palpable, and I realized how much of his life he had kept hidden from me. The second will, the files, and now the looming threat of those who would stop at nothing to claim what they thought was rightfully theirs. It all seemed like too much. The next morning, I received a message from Detective Caldwell. The investigation was moving faster than expected. The arrest of Piers and Bianca Whitcraft has been confirmed. The charges against them were serious: embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. They had already been denied bail. But Xavier was missing. The one person I feared would act out of desperation had disappeared, and with him, the unknown danger he presented to me and everyone involved. The following days unfolded with the kind of rapid, disorienting momentum that only a scandal of this magnitude could create. With Piers and Bianca arrested, the media had a field day, their cameras flashing at every opportunity, desperate to capture the unraveling of the Whitcraft empire. The frenzy surrounding the arrests only intensified when the details of the fraud scheme were released, exposing the depth of the corruption within Maxwell's company and the bitter betrayal of his children. Everywhere I went, the whispers of the public and the press followed. People who had once admired Maxwell, even those who had worked with him, now turned their eyes to me with a strange mix of curiosity and judgment. It was as if the very foundation of the life I had built with Maxwell was being questioned, scrutinized, as though the truth of his legacy was being stripped bare for all to see. I didn't care about their opinions. What mattered now was ensuring that Maxwell's work, the company he had spent his life building, did not go to waste, that the employees whose lives depended on Whitcraft Industries still had a future. But there were other decisions to make as well, ones that weighed heavily on me, and the biggest one was what to do with the company. I had inherited everything Maxwell had left behind, but I could feel the burden of it in my bones. With everything in turmoil, it would be easier to sell it all and start fresh. Walk away from the man who had loved me, from the life we had built together. But Maxwell had entrusted me with something far more valuable than just assets. He had given me a responsibility, a duty to protect what he had spent decades constructing. As I sat in the study, papers spread out before me, my fingers hovered over the phone. There was a meeting scheduled with Detective Caldwell to discuss the next steps in the investigation. But what truly weighed on my mind was the question of how to move forward with the company. Josephine entered the room quietly, her presence as calming as it always had been. She had been with Maxwell and me for years, and now, in this unsettling new world, her support was a lifeline. "Mrs. Ellie, is everything all right?" she asked softly. "I'm fine," I replied, though I knew I wasn't. My fingers traced the edge of a document, a potential merger agreement with another company. It could save Whitcraft Industries, but it would mean losing control. Josephine watched me for a moment, her gaze unwavering. "You know you don't have to do this alone," she said, a quiet certainty in her voice. "You don't have to carry Maxwell's legacy by yourself. There are people who can help." I looked up at her, meeting her steady eyes. I know. But Maxwell trusted me. He believed in me. I can't just walk away from this. Not after everything. She nodded slowly. Then we'll figure it out together. I'll be here every step of the way. I gave her a small smile of gratitude, the weight on my chest easing, if only slightly. I wasn't alone in this, and for the first time since Maxwell's death, I felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could do this. Later that afternoon, as I made my way to the Ravensdale Police Department to meet Detective Caldwell, I couldn't shake the thought of Xavier. His disappearance had sent a ripple of fear through me, and though the authorities were doing everything they could to find him, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that he was closer than I wanted him to be. When I arrived, the building was buzzing with activity, but Caldwell was waiting for me in a small, dimly lit office. He looked worn, but his sharp eyes didn't miss a thing. "Mrs. Whitcraft-Toft," he greeted me, offering a slight nod. "Thank you for coming." I sat down across from him, and he handed me a file, the familiar blue folder containing the latest developments. "Piers and Bianca are both in custody," he said, getting straight to the point. "The charges are serious, but we're still working through the evidence. We've secured most of the files, but there are a few gaps. I need you to look over this and see if anything stands out." I opened the file, flipping through pages of documents detailing wire transfers, false reports, and incriminating communications. Everything pointed to one thing: a coordinated effort to steal from the company, to dismantle it for personal gain. The implications were staggering, and the more I read, the more I realized how close Maxwell had come to losing everything. "What about Xavier?" I asked, unable to ignore the lingering question. Caldwell's eyes hardened. "We're still searching for him. The good news is that he doesn't have many places to run, but he's got resources, and that makes him dangerous. We're doing everything we can to locate him, but until then, I need to make sure you're safe." "I'm safe," I replied, but my voice lacked the conviction I needed. "Are you sure?" Caldwell asked. "You need to understand, things are going to get messy. The media is already on to the story, and the pressure's only going to increase. You'll be in the public eye whether you want to be or not." I paused, thinking about everything that had happened in the past few weeks. The funeral, the will reading, the arrest of Maxwell's children. The world I had known had been upended, and I was now caught in the aftermath of a scandal that was larger than anything I could have ever imagined. "I'm ready for whatever comes next," I said finally, feeling the weight of the words. Caldwell didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue. "I'll have an officer with you at all times. If Xavier tries to contact you, if he shows up anywhere near you, I want to know immediately." "I understand," I replied, though part of me wasn't sure if I was prepared for what lay ahead. The rest of the day passed in a blur. When I returned to Highan Estate, I was met with a scene that felt eerily calm, as if the world outside had forgotten the chaos that had swept through our lives. I walked through the halls, trying to find some semblance of peace among the memories. But even as I tried to find solace in the familiar surroundings, I knew that the storm wasn't over. There were still decisions to be made, battles to fight, and the legacy Maxwell had entrusted to me was hanging in the balance. As the night crept in, I sat alone in Maxwell's study, contemplating my next move. The future of Whitcraft Industries, the future of Highan Estate, and my own future were all tied together in ways I had never expected. It was no longer just about protecting Maxwell's legacy. It was about fighting for what was right, for the employees who depended on the company, for the people who had trusted Maxwell, and for myself. The next day, as I prepared to head into another meeting with Caldwell, I felt a strange sense of resolve settle over me. This was my battle now, and I was going to fight it, every step of the way. The days following the arrest of Piers and Bianca were a whirlwind. The media coverage was relentless, with news outlets publishing every scrap of information they could get their hands on about the Whitcraft family scandal. Every day, new revelations seemed to surface: emails, leaked documents, testimonies from former employees, each piece adding weight to the crushing image of betrayal. For the first time, I realized just how vast Maxwell's empire truly was and how much it was now teetering on the edge of collapse. Despite the chaos, I remained resolute. Maxwell's death, his careful planning, the fraud scheme. All of it had led me here, to this point of reckoning. I had inherited more than just wealth. I had inherited the responsibility to navigate the storm he had left behind. The weight of it all sometimes felt suffocating, but I knew that turning away wasn't an option. The detective's report was damning. Not only had Maxwell's children systematically drained the company's resources, but they had conspired to sell off its most valuable assets to competitors before Maxwell's death. They had been so convinced they could get away with it that they didn't think the evidence would ever surface. Xavier, however, remained the biggest unknown. While Piers and Bianca were securely in custody, Xavier had vanished into thin air, his whereabouts uncertain. It had been days since the police had last tracked his movements, and every day without word felt like a ticking time bomb. He was the most volatile of the three, the one with the least to lose, and that terrified me. It was late one afternoon when I got the call that sent my heart racing. "Mrs. Whitcraft-Toft?" Caldwell's voice crackled through the phone. "We've located Xavier." I froze, my mind running through a dozen possibilities at once. "Where is he?" "He's holed up in a cabin near Lake Merritt. We've got a full team on standby, but we're moving in now." "I want you to stay put." "Stay put," I repeated, a hint of disbelief in my voice. "I'm coming. I need to be there." I had no intention of sitting idly by while Xavier tried to escape justice, especially after everything he had done. "Mrs. Whitcraft-Toft, please listen to me," Caldwell urged. "Xavier is dangerous. He knows how to manipulate situations. He could use you as leverage. You need to stay safe." But I wasn't hearing it. The thought of Xavier roaming free, still capable of causing untold damage, was too much to bear. "I'll be fine," I said, my voice firm. "I've been through worse. I'll come alone. You can monitor from a distance, but I'm going." "He won't expect me to. Ellie, please. For Maxwell's sake." "Goodbye, Caldwell." I cut him off, already moving toward the door. I didn't need his permission. I had to see this through, no matter the cost. The drive to the cabin felt like an eternity. My pulse hammered in my ears as I gripped the steering wheel, every passing second adding to the weight of the decision I had just made. Agent Camera had tried to reach me earlier, but I had ignored her calls. I wasn't going to let anyone else dictate what I could or couldn't do. As I reached the outskirts of Lake Merritt, a familiar sense of unease gnawed at me. This was where Maxwell and I had come before, looking for solace and peace in the quiet beauty of nature. Now, it felt like a haunting reminder of everything that had been shattered. I parked near the cabin, the trees surrounding it heavy with the oppressive silence of the woods. I stepped out of the car, my footsteps muted on the gravel driveway. The cabin loomed ahead, its darkened windows reflecting the overcast sky, giving it an eerie, almost abandoned feel. The door was slightly ajar, just as I had feared. Xavier was inside. I pushed the door open, my heart pounding in my chest. The smell of damp wood and the faint scent of tobacco lingered in the air. The cabin was sparsely furnished, the kind of place Maxwell would have stayed in for a retreat, but now it felt more like a trap, a place where secrets could be kept. "Xavier," I called softly, my voice echoing in the stillness. There was no answer, but I knew he was there. I could feel it. Suddenly, from behind a corner, he emerged, his eyes dark and unreadable. He looked the same as I remembered him, but now there was a sharpness to his gaze, something colder than I had ever seen before. "So, you finally came," he said, his tone surprisingly calm, as if nothing had happened. "I had to," I replied, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside me. "We need to talk." Xavier didn't move. "About what?" "About the company. About the fraud? Or about the fact that you're standing here, pretending like you have any idea who I am?" I took a slow step forward, not breaking eye contact. "I know exactly who you are, Xavier. You're someone who was betrayed, just like me. But unlike you, I'm not out for revenge. I'm here to stop the destruction, To fix what you and your siblings did. He shook his head, a bitter smile curling at the edges of his lips. You think you can fix it? You think you can save that company, save yourself? All of this, everything, is already too far gone. I'm not trying to save myself, I countered. I'm trying to save the people who worked for your father. I'm trying to save the company. You think you're the only one who's been hurt? I lost my husband, Xavier. Maxwell was more than just a man to me. He was my partner, my love, and he built everything we have together. I'm not going to let you destroy it. Xavier's face flickered with something, a crack in his steely facade. But it disappeared just as quickly, replaced with a sneer. You think you can carry that burden? You can't. You're not strong enough. I am, I said, my voice unwavering. And I will make sure justice is done. No matter what. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought he was about to lash out. But then, to my surprise, he simply turned away, retreating to the back of the cabin. You don't get it. None of this matters anymore. You're just a pawn in a game you'll never understand. I stood frozen, unsure of what he meant, but suddenly, a noise broke through the tension. An engine, distant but unmistakable. The sound of sirens, closing in fast. Xavier, I called, stepping closer. It's over. You can't run anymore. It's done. He didn't respond. Instead, he moved toward the back door, disappearing into the woods behind the cabin. Before I could react, a group of officers stormed into the cabin, quickly surrounding the area. I heard the sharp voices of agents on the radio, coordinating their movements, and then, with a rush of adrenaline, I realized they had him. Xavier was no longer a threat. But his actions, the pain he had caused, the destruction he had wrought, would never be erased. The legacy Maxwell had entrusted to me was mine now, and I would protect it with everything I had. The drive back to Halcyon felt different. The sky had cleared, the clouds parting to reveal a quiet, starry night. The estate was bathed in a soft, silvery light, its towering walls and manicured grounds somehow reassuring, a symbol of everything I had fought for and everything I had lost. As I stepped inside, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. Maxwell had trusted me, believed in me, and now, I was responsible for the legacy we had built together. I walked through the halls of the estate, the house that had once been a place of warmth, of love, now a monument to both triumph and tragedy. The future was uncertain, the next steps unclear, but one thing was certain. I was no longer just a widow, not just Maxwell's wife. I was Elelena Whitcraft-Toft, and the story of the Whitcraft legacy, my legacy, was just beginning.